Hi there, this is John Wilkinson again from History Made Easier, and in this presentation I aim to explain the outcome of World War I by looking at the extent of the mobilization of economic resources with regard to Britain and France. Something that was important to begin with, but once the war developed into a war of attrition, and that was actually very early in the war, late 1914, we could say it was vital. World War I was a total war, do not be in doubt of that, in which the entire nation is called into service, and the home economies played a huge part in its outcome. Two things became critically important: feeding the population at home and the men at the front, and supplying the men at the fronts with what they needed to fight the war. And to succeed, three factors are critically important: economic development before the war, the ability to organise the home front, meaning economies and people, and access to overseas markets. With all the powers expecting a short war, it wasn't long before the stocks of ammunition were in desperately short supply, particularly high explosive shells, and this is where my presentation will focus. Within less than 2 months, France faced a shortage of shells that reduced its ability to seize an advantage when the Battle of the Marne pushed the German forces back. Britain too was quickly short of shells, as they fought to stop the Germans reaching the French coast. The scale of the production levels that existed at the outset of war and what was required is shown by the increase in production in France, where by June 1916 it was producing more shells per day than were being produced per month at the start of the war. And this had to be organised by the government. Governments intervened in life and the economy, passing laws that would not be accepted in peacetime, taking control of economic production, nationalising factories, determining production targets, allocating manpower and other resources. Britain had enough guns, but it was fast running out of anything to fire. By May 1915, so serious was the shell crisis, or shell scandal, that most British guns had been reduced to firing just 4 shells a day, and it seemed as if the war was going to be lost, not in the trenches, but the factories of Britain. Sir John French, Commander-in-Chief of the British Army, gave detailed information of the shell shortage to the war correspondent of the Times, as well as to the Conservative leader, Andrew Bonar Law, in order to put pressure on the government to do something about it. The crisis saw the downfall of Asquith's Liberal government in May 1915, and its replacement with a coalition, although Asquith stayed on as Prime Minister. Lloyd George became the head of a new Ministry of Munitions, tasked with increasing the supply of artillery shells. Lloyd George did everything to make sure production increased. He bullied employers whilst allowing huge profits to be made. He worked with the unions to free up working practices, promising improvements in post-war working conditions, and the first women started work in munitions factories. But more than that, he played a central role in the increasing scale of state intervention across the economy. An alternative way to make acetone needed to make cordite was found using grain. The government then commandeered brewing and distillery equipment and built factories to utilise the new process. A massive factory capable of producing 800 tons of cordite a day was built, Other factories were retooled for shell production. The production of shells increased from only 500,000 per month in the first 5 months of the war to peak at between 4.5 million and over 6 million a month during the Battle of the Somme in 1916, levelling out at around 4 million per month for the rest of the war. And they were needed. By the end of the war, the British Army had fired 170 million shells. When Lloyd George became Prime Minister in December 1916, new government departments were set up to oversee ever more aspects of the British war effort. 12 new ministries, many headed by men from business rather than politicians, were established to manage the likes of shipping, food production and distribution. By the end of the war, the British economy was thoroughly mobilised for war. Through the Railway Executive Committee, Ministry of Shipping and Canal Control Committee, the government controlled the means of transportation. The Coal Controller and Minister of Munitions commanded the fuel, raw materials and factories that manufactured the weapons of war, and the Ministries of Food and Agriculture saw to food production. The state was the largest producer of goods in the country and oversaw a significant rise in economic activity. France suffered badly from the territory it lost in the first months of the war. 55% of its coal and 80% of its steel came from territory that was now in German hands. However, France's transformation of its armaments production was even more successful than Britain's. Though the British Royal Navy was critically important to France too. 50% of all steel used in French factories between 1915 and 1918 was imported from Britain and America, and coal was imported from Britain too. This, and by redirecting 350,000 soldiers headed for the front to the war industries, 500,000 by 1918, and bolstering them with more than 400,000 women by the war's end, meant that France was able to increase its daily output of shells. And it was achieved with less government intervention than in Germany or Britain. France's war production was left largely to groups of privately owned companies, each responsible for a particular military need, for example shells or rifles. These consortiums received government orders and targets, then worked collaboratively to fill them, and the French achieved some spectacular increases in armaments production. By 1916, French producers were making 3.3 million shells per month, 4.5 million by 1918. Such striking increases actually made France the largest Allied producer of weapons and munitions, even exceeding America. Indeed, when American troops started arriving in France, they were largely supplied by French industry. Incidentally, the map on this slide shows the extent of damage inflicted on French territory. So you can see something of the ways in which Britain and France responded to total war. And if you put this together with my other presentations on the mobilization of human and economic resources, you will have a very good body of knowledge. But I do have more detailed notes which I can send you if you would like me to. Just email me at historymadeeasier@gmail.com, and as I always say, be assured I will not pester you with emails. I don't work like that, and I haven't the time. Even if I had, I wouldn't do such a thing. I don't like it when I get pestered with marketing. Anyway, as always, let me thank you for listening and wish you the very best of luck in your studies. Cheers.